All right, so welcome to our Four Swords adventure. This is honestly our first Zelda panel in the entire time that we've been doing the Sci-Fi Fantasy Festival. So I wanted to do this panel, and my question is, why does this franchise resonate so strongly? Like, there are people who will buy a Nintendo system specifically to play a Zelda game, like at least a $200 commitment. So that's some name power right there. So that's what I would like to try and figure out. If anybody knows the answer right now, we can just go ahead and blurt it out and shut it down for the night. Otherwise, then we'll go around, introduce everybody, and say, like, if you have a particular favorite Zelda game, or what your introduction to the series was. Let's go up above me first, Ryan.
Yeah, so my first game ever was Link to the Past. That's the first game I ever beat. Growing up, we had Super Nintendo, played a lot of Mario, Super Mario World. When we got Zelda, and I booted it up and just fell in love. Played right through it. Been the game multiple times since then. And since I've played just about every Zelda game there is, excluding a few random little outliers like Four Swords, which is hard to play without the right hardware and setup. But yeah.
Melanie?
Hey, I'm Melanie. My first Zelda game, I kind of joined the Zelda party later than most because I didn't have a Nintendo growing up and all that, so I didn't really start playing until I was an adult. But my first Zelda game was the Ocarina of Time that I played on a friend's console. They had been bugging me forever. It was their favorite game. They're like, you have to play this, you have to play this. And finally I gave in, and I loved it. But I think my favorite now is probably Breath of the Wild. But, yeah.
All right, Brooklyn?
Hi, my name is Brooklyn, and my introduction to Zelda was Ocarina of Time on the 64. It was my first, real look at it. I was probably too young to be playing something like that, because I really just liked to run around and just hit things and ride Epona, and that's what I did most of the time. So I never really beat it when I was a kid, but I played it again when I was an adult and beat it. But my favorite Zelda game, I think, would probably be Majora's Mask, because I love the story so much, and I also really like Wind Waker. That one's a great one too. Those are my favorites.
Yeah, I'm Sean, despite what my name on the screen says. And I'm with you. I loved Wind Waker. I loved Majora's Mask because I thought the stories were so strong. I was a little partial towards Spirit Tracks because I love the fact that Zelda actually gets to go on the adventure. My introduction to The Legend of Zelda was through A Link to the Past, and I just remember how revolutionary it felt, because at that time most of the cartridge games were kind of arcade games that you just were able to play at home, and The Legend of Zelda was the series that sort of upped the ante for what you can do with a home console. So before we get into it, there was a friend of mine who I think was a little nervous about watching the panel because of potential spoilers. Never occurred to me before that there were spoilers in a game. You always assume Link wins at the end, but I don't know what some people consider spoilers and some don't. So suffice to say, we're not going to deliberately put spoilers out there for anything, but I don't think we're also going to really go out of our way to avoid them. So yeah, we're kind of proceed at your own risk. All right, so first topic of discussion. I think the big backbone of the entire franchise is the Triforce. We have any thoughts about that? It's kind of a simple concept. Rule of three.
Yeah, it's something the backbone. We had the three pieces: courage, power, wisdom. Courage always links to Link. Part of the pun there. Wisdom always goes to Zelda, and then power, of course, is something Ganon seeks and sometimes gets, sometimes doesn't. It's something the backbone of the series, the world, and most of the stories within that world too.
I kind of like the simplicity of it, and I think it's one of the advantages the entire franchise has is you don't really have to do a whole lot of homework to get into it. You can just sort of jump in, get immersed in the world, as opposed to something like the Kingdom Hearts series, where you either have to be familiar with the Disney movies or you have to have read the comics, and even then it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, in order sort of that you had to read a full Wikipedia page, and watch 10 5-hour videos to understand it.
Play all the little mini games and side games that they put out in between the main ones.
But Zelda, it's accessible. Like, it's high enough fantasy where you've got the 3 goddesses, and you've got the sword and the goddess reincarnated, and there's a whole lot more to it if you want to care about that. If you don't, you don't have to. Essentially, the plot is the mean guy is back, and we got to stop him from doing something, and we need you to go get the thing. And it's really urgent unless you want to go fishing, in which case, take your time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry. It's very great that each story is self-contained. There is at least one direct sequel and some somewhat direct sequels. But for the most part, each story is its own story. You're not having to play Wind Waker to understand Skyward Sword. You're not having to play Skyward Sword to understand Twilight Princess. They're all self-contained individual dialogues in there.
What do we think about Ganon as the lead villain? I mean, he does what he needs to do, obviously.
Yeah. So I think he's actually a good villain overall. He puts a threat on the world, and he poses the call to action. He's trying to gain power, or someone else is trying to resurrect him, or whatever is going on is why Zelda usually calls up Link and says, "Hey, I need a hero," essentially, and so. It's the inciting force in any of the games, really. I mean, there's very few that don't have Ganon or someone trying to bring Ganon about, as the central antagonist there.
Yeah. I know we've talked a little bit before about how he might be kind of underdeveloped as a character. And I kind of agree with that, especially I guess in the modern age where we've got a lot more games that have less of the black and white good versus evil dichotomy there. There's usually some complexity that I feel like might be missing from him. I think that his best characterization probably comes from Ocarina of Time. We get more of his backstory and stuff there. And I would like maybe to see in some of the future games to have him have a little bit more of a story other than just, I want to conquer Hyrule, or, gain all the power, get the Triforce, and get some more why, dude?
Yeah.
That's about I always love villains in things. They're always so interesting, and Ganon's interesting too, but I always whenever I play a Zelda game, I always want more out of Ganon than what I get. And I just I want this super deep villain story out of him, and I never quite get what I want out of that. So I'm hoping that changes, because you get so much out of other characters, but I just want something for him.
Yeah, I'm actually very hopeful for the Breath of the Wild sequel to give us a better developed canon, because the first one, he's just this nebulous evil cloud, and the second one seems like it's going, based on the trailer so far, seems like it's going to delve deeper into that, so I'm looking forward to that. I will say that one of the best, most developed villains, I would say, are antagonists, not really villains, is the antagonist in Link Between Worlds. I don't want to go too spoiler there, but essentially what they're trying to do is they're trying to revive their mirror version of Hyrule. It's kind of gotten dark, and they're missing their Triforce, and so their goal is to revitalize their Triforce and get their light back to their world. So Zelda definitely does have well-developed villains or antagonists at the very least. Ganon played a part in that, and in that one especially, he was very uninvolved and very undeveloped. But the actual antagonists themselves, I think, was very well written and had a actual motivation other than just I want power.
That's why I love the villain in Majora's Mask, because it was a sympathetic backstory. There was a pain to him. And one of the reasons why I liked Wind Waker so much is there were almost moments where Ganon had some vulnerable reflection. They were real quick and they didn't do much with them, but he started to come across as interesting to me in that game.
Yeah, for sure.
But I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint, because what we've done is we've all kind of thrown in some of our favorite side characters throughout the franchise. Zelda has given us a lot of very colorful side characters.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, Link's Awakening actually took some tips from, what was it? Twin Peaks.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, let me find... Yep. Trying to figure out how this worked before. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Oh wait, here we go.
There we go.
Yay.
All right. I don't know who drew this picture, but I love the fact that Ganon actually looks fairly pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move into our first side character, Beetle. I think this was Melanie's...
Yes.
What do we say about Beetle?
Is the PowerPoint supposed to go forward or?
Did it not go forward?
No.
Yeah, we're seeing. I think you showed that on screen. I think we're seeing your like control of it, rather than the actual slideshow itself.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, that works.
Okay.
Yeah. So Beetle's kind of a weird character. He's a salesman. My boy Beetle with the bowl cut and the bug obsession. That's what I like to say. But so he, can be found in a couple of the different Legend of Zelda games. Most notably, I think Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild, and he's just kind of like booping around the world, selling useful items and looking for bugs. So, does he appear in like any other major games?
He's in I know he's in Spirit Tracks, and I think he was in the one with the boat before it, which I completely
Wind
Waker?
Yeah. No, the DS game.
Oh, Phantom Hourglass. Is that one you're thinking of?
Yeah, that one.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, I don't know. He's just kind of one of my favorite, like, odd characters that keeps showing up for whatever reason. And I just kind of love his whole shtick. He's kind of like, this awkward but adorable little scrawny guy going around. And you just run into him every once in a while. And I love his giant backpack that looks like a beetle in Breath of the Wild. So I don't know. He's just like one of my favorite random characters.
He's got some brass tacks too. I mean, without the Triforce of Courage, he's willing to put himself in just about any situation because he loves his job so much. All right. I'm going to move on unless somebody's got something they want to blurt out about Beetle. Then we're going to... Is either it's Big Goron or Bigoron.
My boy. I love him so much. He was my favorite thing about Ocarina of Time. That, like, the Gorons are, like, my favorite race. in all of Zelda. I've always just loved them. They're like my favorite levels. I don't know what it is. Like, they're just so cute. And he's adorable. He is a very skilled blacksmith. He's skilled for how skilled he is at making weapons and other things. And like, you just look at his face. He's so cute. Like, and the little baby Gorons and the big, he's just so cute. Look.
It raises some real questions about the nature of the world of Zelda. You sort of imagine Link going to Zelda and saying, "Okay, why do you need me to do this stuff when this guy could just step on you?" And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just get so happy when I see him. Like, any Gorons I just see in Zelda, I get so happy. They're just like, those levels are so fun. And they're just chilling. They're just having a good time.
Yeah.
I just love it.
all right, we'll go on to Dompe.
Yeah, so Dompe is an interesting character. He, of course, is from Ocarina of Time originally. He also has an appearance in Link's Awakening, the remake, as the one that you use to create your homemade dungeons, which is a really cool idea. One thing that's what I have is that you see he's one of the few characters you see between old and young Link. There's a handful that you see between the two. But oddly enough, he's the only one that is a personified ghost as an adult. You of course have ghosts, you have zombies that you kind of face in Ocarina of Time as an adult. You have the pose, you have the redos, I think is what they're called. But he's just himself as a ghost for some reason. So he happened to be able to do that as opposed to everybody else who died as you become an adult Link, just being dead. So that was just kind of intriguing and weird that he was able to keep himself as a ghost there.
It's really reliable for being a universal monster.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to, okay, I haven't played Skyward Sword. Is it Fi or Fi?
Nobody can really decide, honestly.
Okay, good.
Fi is such an interesting character to me. Like it says, she's supposed to be the humanoid spirit residing in the goddess sword in Skyward Sword. She also makes an appearance in the first Hyrule Warriors game. And like, I like Fi as a character, but I don't really actually like her as like the spirit of the sword, especially since, like, kind of spoilers, at the end of the game she decides to, or like volunteers to go to sleep forever within the sword. So like, she's there and just unconscious like forever after that game. Like, it's kind of sad. But I like her also as a guide, I guess, more than I liked Navi. Yeah. She's less obnoxious.
Hey, listen.
But yeah, she was kind of interesting. She has this like really kind of adorable, almost robot-y sounding voice that, just is kind of gibberish. But I just kind of liked her as I was going through Skyward Sword. And I also really liked her in Hyrule Warriors, as, you can play her as a warrior. And she, she doesn't have any weapons. She is a weapon. So her like fighting style is very like graceful and dance-like, but still very powerful. So it was a lot of fun. Just kind of having her twirl around and kick butt.
Plus, it's nice to imagine that the Master Sword that's accompanied you throughout the entire series suddenly has a personality.
Yeah, but it's also, like I said, so sad. Like, beyond that game, you don't really get to interact with her. So I don't know if that was necessarily like a really good choice for the story. But I guess if they were going to do it, I like how she turned out. So that's kind of where I stand on that.
All right. So our next guy.
Yeah, half mass salesman. So he made his debut actually in Link's Awakening, back on the Game Boy Color, or Game Boy in the Game Boy Color. He's just a random dude who No, I'm sorry, not Link's Awakening. It was Oracle of Ages. He was this random dude who wanted some meat, and once you gave him some meat, he acted a little weird and eventually gave you a mask that you used in the game. But he kind of just went in a little side character, little shop owner. But he made his role debut in Ocarina of Time, where he mainly was part of like a side like trading quest, but actually involved Big Goron as well. So, you eventually traded up to get the Big Goron sword, which was the most powerful sword in the game. You can use your shield while using it, so that was a good catch. He's just like real weird dude. He was like, he would get mad, real like we're mad and like weird if you didn't have the money for the mask he lent you to sell. It's a really weird character, and then they just went all in on him on Jorah's mask. He's just real creepy. He's kind of the background antagonist. And then also the Skull Kid is the main antagonist, but he's kind of the background. He somehow is able to resist the resetting of the time. He kind of is, along with you and a few others, are the ones who don't get reset, which is weird. There's some theories that he's possibly a deity of some sort within the Zelda universe. He's just a really weird dude. He gets mad. He has this crazy faces. He evidently stole Mario's face at one point. That's actually in the game, so that's extra weird. Yeah, just real creepy dude, but fun, at the same time. It's interesting.
Yeah, I have a feeling we haven't seen the last of him in the series.
Yeah, probably not.
All right, the Keaton. Speaking of masks.
I love it. Like, Keaton's, I love that about Majora's Mask, the little mini games with them. I enjoyed it so much. And, like, when I played this game as a kid, I was really big into Pokemon, and it reminded me of a Pokemon, so I was like, that's cool. And it also reminds me of Animal Crossing a little bit, or it did. It reminded me of Red, because they look like, just, that was one thing that I always enjoyed about some of the Zelda games, when they would throw the little mini stuff in there to kind of, like, if you're feeling a little bogged down, you can just, like, go play a little mini game with a cute little fox. It's so cute. I love it.
But I love an Ocarina of Time when the guard buys the mask from you, and then he wears it the rest of the game.
Yeah.
He just trying to stand there with this dignity while he's wearing the mask. All right, Malin. I think I chose all the characters that started with an M. I loved the fact that it's kind of this. She's presented as sort of a potential love interest for the fanfic writers, and you kind of want to give up on the quest to spend a little time at the ranch and just see how an ordinary person lives in Hyrule. But then they changed her into both the child and the adult version in Majora's Mask in one of the more heart-wrenching subplots with the cows and the I think at one point it was Cremia and Romani. Romani is the little girl, and she conceivably gets abducted by aliens, and then she's just complete emotionally blank afterwards. Some real nightmare fuel. Then Medley. She was the first character that I really remember you got to take into the dungeon with you, and it wasn't until I was carrying her around with me that I realized how lonely it is when you go on these dungeon adventures. And so it was really nice to have somebody that you could switch back and forth to, and I kind of wanted to see more of that in some of the Zelda games. All right, Midna. What can we say about Midna?
She was a fun, complex character.
Yeah. And she's definitely one of the more interesting companion characters that actually plays a larger role. You know, Navi, she's just kind of there floating around. Fi has a big role, but she doesn't necessarily do a ton. But Midna, she's there with you. She's got to be Rolf. She holds transfer back and forth, and I think she's like one of the most important side characters, honestly.
Some of the best back and forth, not really dialogue because Link doesn't really talk, but
Little quips they have.
yeah.
Yeah.
I loved her spectrum of emotions. Like, I really wanted to spend more time with her in the series.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, everybody seems to complain about Navi, but I defend her. I mean, it wasn't her fault that the game developers didn't think to tone down her random input at inappropriate times.
Yeah. It's like if I'm 30 hours from the quest, I think I know how to lock on by now. It's kind of the part where I think they fell short.
Now, does it bother anybody else? The implication is that in Majora's Mask, Link was trying to track down Navi and he never finds her.
Yeah, a little disturbing, for sure.
Where did she go?
We don't
know.
We don't know.
She ascended back into the light in the Temple of Time, and that was the last we've heard of her.
Yeah.
All right.
So Ravio is another interesting character. He is in Link Between Worlds, which is an indirect sequel to A Link to the Past. He's basically Nega Link in a sense. He's from Lowrule, which is the counterpart of Hyrule. And he decides he's going to take over Link's house in Hyrule and just sell you weapons and make bank off that. Which is weird, because the whole thing that he's trying to do is also save his own world. But he was a bit too much of a coward. They're missing the Triforce of Courage, at least. It's kind of part of the reason that happened. So they were relying on Link, you, and Hyrule to save them. Yeah, he's a fun little character. He's kind of goofy until the end, where he gets a little more serious. Yeah, it's interesting seeing a different version of Link other than just Dark Link. Basically just Shadow who fights you.
All right, Salvatore. I feel like this game gets me. I just love this is how I feel on a regular day, where it's just kind of, okay, we'll get on with it, and then all of a sudden he comes to life when he's got this thing around his face, and he's like, "Oh, Princess Zelda!" I just love how much personality they cram into this guy with such little game time.
That's exactly how I feel. That's another boy of mine. I love him so much. I am excited to see what the future holds for this character. One thing that I love about some characters that are protagonists is when things are really bad, everything's just bad, and then you have this one character who is just still optimistic, enthusiastic, we can get through this, we can get through anything. I love that about him. At first he was just kind of but the more you're around him, just the more enjoyable he gets. And I am so excited to see what they do with him in the future. And I also love the memes that came out of it. When the game came out and people saw him for the first time, it was so funny. I loved looking at all the memes. It was great. It was just so great.
Yeah.
And also Highlands are really cool. They are just so cool. They might be my second favorite after Gorons, I think, as far as races go. They're so cool. So cool.
Everybody needs a Sidon in their life.
All right, moving on to Tingle.
That I could do without.
I don't have any real feelings about Tingle, but apparently a lot of people legitimately hate him.
I wouldn't say I hate him, but he's definitely a acquired taste.
Yeah. I don't mind
Yeah.
him too much. Like, I definitely can understand why people don't like him, but I don't mind him. He's just kind of hanging out. He's doing his
I
thing.
did. I enjoyed in Four Swords Adventure when a huge gem appeared. He would come in on balloons to collect it if you didn't get it, and if you got it before he did, he would just go, "Aw," and then float away again. And there was something kind of gratifying about being able to disappoint him.
Urbosa. Oh, she's probably like one of my favorite, I guess, side characters in the Breath of the Wild. Besides just being kind of like, awesome warrior woman, like, and leader of her people, like, she's also like very kind. And like, I really liked the relationship she had with Zelda. What little we got to see of it. She was very protective of her and encouraging her, when a lot of people are, expecting, just like watching Zelda expectantly for her powers to awaken. She's got all this pressure on her from her dad, and Urbosa's just kind of there for her and, like, gives her a pep talk when she needs it. It's like, just take your time, yeah, things are kind of getting down towards crunch time, but we'll get there. And kind of like Sidon, everybody needs a Urbosa in their life, like,
Mm-hmm.
someone who will crush your enemies and also pat you on the head when you're sad.
I'd love to see a spin-off game where you actually get to play as her. Just one time have something that goes on in Hyrule that doesn't involve the Triforce and see what that adventure looks like.
Yeah, you get to play her a little bit in Hyrule Warriors
Age of Calamity.
Age of Calamity, yeah. So, and like do like a bunch of different side quests and stuff with her, and so that's fun. But it's also very, it's definitely very different from like a regular Zelda game. So
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just saying that there actually is a one adventure where you don't focus on the Triforce, and that is Minish Cap. Yeah. So I in the Triforce is the defining feature of Zelda. The Minish Cap shies away from that. They your main quest there is to rebuild the Four Sword, and to use that to vanquish Vati, who is a new villain, separate from Ganon, and isn't really tied to Ganon anyway, oddly enough, actually.
yeah, that's one that I haven't played yet, but I'd like to.
I highly recommend it. Yeah,
it's a good one. I liked it.
Yeah, I really hope they put it on a Switch release at some point. In theory, they might put it out with the 35th anniversary of Zelda coming up on like a compilation, like they did with the Mario games. So if they did that, I'd be very excited to see a Switch release of Minish Cap.
All right, so that brings us to our power couple. Close this out. Don't save. I'm back. All right, so the relationship between Link and Zelda, very inconsistent. Sometimes they seem to have an attraction to each other. I think in one game it was suggested that they were related. Sometimes it's purely platonic, but there is always something about Zelda who has to stay relatively in a central location, and Link who has to go out and do all her errands.
Except for in Fanfare Glass. That one's very different.
Why is it The Legend of Zelda?
Actually, the name Zelda comes from Fitzgerald's wife, Zelda. Scott Fitzgerald. His wife Zelda was the reason behind that name. They wanted it to be the legend of something. They didn't know what they wanted it to be the legend of. And one of the developers was like, hey, there's this American author with a wife named Zelda. That's a really cool name. We could do the Legend of Zelda and name the princess Zelda. So that's kind of where it comes from. They just kind of wanted to sound cool,
I think they even got permission from the estate to.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah. As far as why they did that, rather than going with like the Triforce stories or like
Legend
Link's
of Link.
Adventures and like that, like I think it's because they didn't want that to necessarily be the focus. They didn't want it to be tied down to the Triforce or tied down to Link. They wanted it to be more about the legend of something. And that didn't really Zelda. I think that worked out pretty well because Zelda is usually called adventure, especially like in like I said, my first one, Link to the Past. You're asleep in your bed and your uncle wakes up and there's a voice in your head saying, "Come, save me, help, please." And that's your called adventure, and that's Zelda talking to you, to like a telepathic link. I think that's really cool that they did that. And the first adventure, you're on a path of Zelda again, and they lead into that. They don't really have you have to read the book to really get the story behind Legend of Zelda, the first one. Monster, your goal is to save Zelda. There's different ways to get there. You of course start off with your trusty sword that's given you by the old man in the cave. Don't go alone. It's not safe to go alone. Take this. That old trope. But then the second one is really really tied into that whole Zelda lineage, because you are trying to save that original Zelda. There's a new Zelda, 100 years in the future. You're a new Link, but that original Zelda was put to sleep, and is still asleep in her bed that you're trying to save her. And then from there, it just kind of goes on with that story of Zelda and I think it's the prince in the second one that says that he's going to name every Zelda for generations or every princess for generations the same name Zelda. So that's where that name kind of comes from over and over and over again.
There's also some I guess connection that they go into in Skyward Sword, where I think that in the timeline that's supposed to be the first game, and at the end, the bad guy, which is basically Ganon, when he is defeated, he says that he curses Zelda and Link to be, haunted by him or a piece of him or a reincarnation of him for, all the generations that come after. And so, I guess that is sort of, where the legend is supposed to have begun as well. So I guess the original Zelda and Link. And I guess people just kept naming their kids Link and Zelda after that. It's a family name.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. But
well, I love that it creates kind of a selflessness for Link, because usually when you play the lead character, it's about me. I'm the huzzah guy. I'm going to go out and conquer everything.
Yeah, like Mario, the game's named for him. It's his story,
By saying it's the legend of somebody who's not you, it keeps it in a perspective. Look, I'm doing this because it needs to be done. I'm probably one of the least qualified people in this whole kingdom to do this.
Yes.
But there's no question that I'm going to pick up my wooden sword and I'm going to go into the spider-filled cavern and
do what I can.
And then
yeah, and the fact that also Link never speaks in the series too is kind of I guess plays into that a little bit. I know that in Breath of the Wild they kind of talk about it a little bit. Zelda says something about Link feeling like he has all this responsibility and he doesn't want to detract from that with his words or something like that. So he's just very stoic or something like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting little feature that they have, consistently throughout the games. Link is the only person that doesn't really talk.
Yeah, something fits design. It is as essence, it is a role-playing game of sorts. So having that slate that you can put yourself in, I think really works in that aspect.
Well, just to kind of wind down, one of the questions that we had was the most fun game mechanics. There's that combined with most compelling storylines. Anything jump out at anybody? I like the hook shot.
The hook shot's always great. That's always a fun toy to use.
I like it in especially like Link to the Past and Link Between Worlds, like using it to like knock out bad guys before, like the really annoying ones that take forever to hit down, and you can just kind of knock them out with a hook shot and then go while they're just frozen.
Yeah.
It's not its intended purpose, but that is my favorite use for it.
One of my favorite things is like in Majora's Mask, you have like the different masks that have the different abilities. And one thing I loved to do when the remake came out was like when I had the Goron mask, I just like to roll around everywhere. That was just really fun. Just like to.
No, it is a lot of fun. Yeah.
They could have a Legend of Zelda Mario Kart game where you're just the Goron on the track.
Just rolling along. I think one of my favorite like game mechanics overall is probably a Link Between Worlds, like turning into a painting, like sliding along the walls and like going from the worlds that way, and it brings a whole new dimension to the puzzle solving, which is one of the key things about Zelda that people kind of overlook. They look at it as like an action RPG, but really puzzles are a huge part of it. The dungeons, getting through them, figuring out which thing to press and how to get through this and what order light the torches in, like that's a huge part of Zelda. And having that extra dimension, you have to change the way you look at everything. I can jump on this block and slide to the side of it, and the block's going to rise up, and I can slide off it and be on a different platform, and that's just really unique. And I think they really took that idea to a whole new level with that game.
Speaking to the puzzles part of Zelda, I think that might be actually why Breath of the Wild is my favorite game, because I am horrible at puzzles, like so bad. So like a lot of the dungeons are in the other games are just like incredibly challenging for me because I can't remember where I've been. Like after I go to the next room, I don't remember what the room I just was in. So like I personally enjoyed, like, you do have the puzzle aspect in like all the shrines and stuff like that, but it's not like something that takes you several hours to get through.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I feel that.
Like I'm super struggling. Like I've been playing A Link to the Past. Yeah. And I am really struggling with not only like the dungeons, but also just getting places between the dark world and the light world. Like it
can be a little esoteric at times. Like it doesn't really paint the way for you necessarily.
Yeah, and like one time I got to where I was trying to go accidentally, but then I died and I couldn't remember how I got back over there. And I tried for like an hour to figure out how to get back over to the other side of the map. And then I just stopped for a little bit because I was so angry.
So now that we've kind of taken it all apart, why do we think we care so much? It's like the video game equivalent of chicken. You compare everything else to it. You don't describe Zelda as, well, it's kind of like Final Fantasy. It's like, no, everybody knows what Zelda is, and that's your starting point. And
yeah. Personally, I think it's... So for me personally, at least, when I was growing up, we had Super Nintendo. I played games like Super Mario, which you just kind of jump around, get the levels, get through fast, blah, blah, blah. Star Race FX, like a racing game. Sunset Riders was like a side-scrolling like shooting game. Those were all fun, but you kind of play it, you put it down, you're kind of done with it. There's not a lot of story there. There's not like character development. But then you play Link to the Past, and that first scene where you wake up with this voice in your head and your uncle, and then you go, you try to follow him, and you end up to the castle. You finally find out. If you've never played before, it takes you a while to find your way into the castle. Finally get in there. Your uncle is there, dying. He hands you his sword and say, "Hey, this is your destiny now." Like as a kid, that was the first time I ever had that kind of experience. Where and in a game there's like a story. There's more than just run and jump within the level. There is, me needing to do something to help save this world. I think that kind of braces people a little bit. It's I think it goes a long way. I think there's been one for almost every generation that has that story. The N64 had Ocarina of Time. The GameCube, they would pick up on Wind Waker. The Wii had Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword on Wii U. So I think every generation has had that kind of opportunity to have that story. And I think that goes into why people love it so much.
And also, I think that the fact that there is this series with an overarching theme and a legend, but with a different self-contained story, like we were talking about earlier, just between every game. And then also they do change up the mechanics between a lot of different games. Some are more tool based, like the Link Between Worlds and Link to the Past, and Ocarina of Time. And then others are more, I guess, open world kind of. I guess Skyward Sword and Breath of the Wild kind of did that. I mean, Breath of the Wild definitely. Skyward Sword, there's a lot of exploration that you get to do. Plus in that one they also brought in sky islands that you fly between on a giant bird. They don't really do that in any other game. So, and Wind Waker, you're going around to different islands on a talking boat. It's just each game kind of has its own
device
different
or
gameplay. Yeah. And some are more story heavy and some are more battle heavy, and some are more focused on, or you get more relationships between the characters. That was one thing that I actually really liked about Skyward Sword was there's so many different characters that you get to know over the course of the game. You learn more about them and you interact with them regularly, and they're not just NPCs. They're your friends, your community in those worlds. And that's something that I really enjoy.
Yeah.
One thing I like about Zelda is there's something for everyone, and there's something for every age group in these games. And there's a lot of games that do that, but there's not a lot of games that really cater just to everyone. If you want, like you said, something more. You just want a good story. You have stuff like Majora's Mask. You have stuff like Skyward Sword. You want something that you just want to punch things. You got 4 swords and stuff like that, and it's simple enough for a kid to be able to jump into and just have a good time. But there's also enough there to where someone that's a teenager or an adult can pick up and play and really enjoy themselves and not feel like they're playing just a kid's game. And that's something that I feel is pretty unique to Zelda, I guess, because there's Mario games, they're really more for kids, and there's games like Grand Theft Auto that are for adults, even though a lot of kids play, and that's kind of problematic. But Zelda's just for everyone, and that's something that I love.
Yeah, I kind of feel like Mario, it's an ongoing obstacle course, but Zelda, it's a little bit slower. It captures more of there's a soul to it. I remember when I started graduate school, my first day there, I got out of the car, I got the Zelda theme song in my head. Okay, I'm going on this journey, and I'm probably going to get knocked down a few times.
Yeah. It's very relatable in that sense that it's not always a perfect journey. You're not always getting there in time. Link to the Past, you're the first third of the game. You're getting through the first 3 dungeons, and you're going to try to stop Agadim, and you don't do it in time. He accomplishes his goal. He creates the Dark World and brings Ganon into the world, and Ocarina of Time. You go through and you think you're making it. You get the 3 stones, you put them in the thing, and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna save the world, and then you don't. It's 7 years past, and you're an adult, and the world's destroyed. So that's
Breath of the
what's
Wild too. Oh my god.
Yeah,
Waking up 100 years later and like everything is different. Like tons of people died, and you're just like, and then you meet the ghosts of your friends too. It's
yeah. So it's not like you're the hero, but you fail. Like you don't always make it.
So I guess the answer is the obvious one. It is about courage.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you lose, you still get up and you go again.
Yeah, I can do this all day. Captain America style. Yeah, it has a lot to that. Probably some reason why people love Captain America so much sometimes. He can back up and keep on going. And that's what Link does.
All right. Well, I think we figured it out. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. If I didn't see any scathing comments in the comment section, so guess nobody disagreed with us too much.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I don't know when our next. We've got another one next month. It's I think they're discussing The Mandalorian, and I forget what the date is, but I'm sure that's going to be on the description of this video when it goes up. So I'm out. Thank you.
Thank you.